They will smile at you, compliment you, applaud you in public. But in private, they test the bars of your mind like a prisoner seeking escape. Manipulators don't announce themselves. They don't need to. They rely on your weakness, not their strength. But what if you could become immune? What if your mind was so forged in reason, so trained in stillness, that no trick, no tactic, no whispered deception could find its way in? Marcus Aurelius didn't just rule Rome, he ruled himself. And in doing so, he became unmanipulatable. Not because he controlled the world, but because he mastered the only thing that ever mattered, his own mind. In this world, power doesn't belong to the loud. It belongs to the silent observer, the one who sees through games. And Marcus left us the map. The first principle is this: never value the opinion of someone who benefits from your confusion. The Stoics warned, flattery is the mask of control. When someone praises you beyond reason, pause. Ask yourself, what do they gain if I believe them? Marcus wrote, it is not the man who speaks well of you that matters, but the man who corrects you when you err. That's how you separate friend from foe. The second principle is detachment. If someone can tempt you with pleasure or scare you with pain, they can own you. But the Stoic feels neither flattered by approval nor wounded by insult. Because truth doesn't depend on emotion. Marcus said, choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Imagine how powerful that makes you, unshaken by praise, unmoved by ridicule. The manipulator, in that moment, is left powerless. Their levers have no grip. Third, clarity of purpose. A man who doesn't know what he wants is a puppet. He dances to whatever tune is played. But a Stoic? He moves with deliberate steps. Marcus Aurelius started each day with the reminder that obstacles would come. Liars, selfish men, manipulators. But none of them could make him abandon his post. Because he knew why he was here. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That's not a quote. That's a shield. Fourth, study people, but attach to none. Marcus didn't walk through the palace blind to the politics, nor did he give his trust easily. Trust, to him, was earned through virtue, not charm. Manipulators often disguise themselves as friends, but friendship without virtue is just decoration. And decoration fades quickly when tested. Observe people. Listen closely. But never assume that words equal truth. As Marcus said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Be careful whose thoughts you allow into your soul. Fifth, own your emotions. The moment someone can provoke you, they control you. Think about that. The person who makes you angry is, in that moment, your master. Stoicism is not about suppressing emotion. It's about transforming it into insight. Anger becomes analysis. Sadness becomes reflection. Jealousy becomes self-awareness. Marcus Aurelius didn't react, he responded. That's what Stoics do. They don't strike back. They observe. And then they strike deeper, with understanding. Sixth, guard your time like a fortress. Manipulators don't just steal your energy. They steal your minutes, your focus, your peace. Marcus warned, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Most people treat time as infinite. So they waste it pleasing others, fearing disapproval, entertaining pointless arguments. But the Stoic sees time as sacred. And nothing manipulates a Stoic into squandering it. Seventh, beware of debt, not just financial, but emotional. Manipulators often give just enough to make you feel obligated. A favor, a compliment, a moment of attention. But behind the curtain is a tally. A silent IOU. The Stoic gives freely and receives without attachment. He does not enter unseen contracts. Marcus Aurelius did not play the game of favors. He acted justly, even if unthanked. That's power, the power to walk away with nothing owed. 8th, question your desires. The Stoics knew that most manipulation begins within. What you crave is what controls you. A man desperate for approval will obey anyone who offers it. A man obsessed with success will tolerate any exploitation to get it. But the Stoic inspects his desires daily. He asks, do I want this because it's right, or because I've been told it will make me worthy? The manipulator sells illusions. The Stoic wants only what is true. 9th, practice silence. The more you speak, the more ammunition you give away. Marcus Aurelius was a ruler, yet he often chose to say nothing. He understood the power of restraint. Manipulators fish with your own words. They twist them, mirror them, use them against you. But when you speak only after thinking deeply, you leave no trail. Silence becomes your shield, and when you do speak, your words carry weight. 10th, understand that control is an illusion. Marcus said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The manipulator depends on your illusion that you must control outcomes. But the Stoic releases that need. He focuses only on what he can govern. His thoughts, his responses, his choices. And in that surrender, he becomes invincible. 11th, don't argue with fools. Manipulators often bait you into endless conflict to drain your energy. They thrive on reaction. But Marcus reminds us, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. The Stoic walks away, not out of weakness, but clarity. He does not waste fire on smoke. 12th, live transparently. Nothing confuses a manipulator more than a man with nothing to hide. Marcus Aurelius lived with integrity not because it looked good, but because it made him untouchable. When your actions match your words, and your words reflect your values, you become like stone, difficult to move, impossible to shape. 13th, remember death. Not morbidly, but wisely. The Stoics believed memento mori was the greatest clarity of all. Because when you truly understand that this moment might be your last, manipulation loses all its grip. You stop trying to be liked. You stop playing games. You begin to live deliberately. And that is something no deceiver can handle. 14th, never react immediately. The manipulator wants urgency, pressure, speed. But Stoicism teaches pause, stillness, time to think. Marcus Aurelius would often journal through the night, not because he needed more answers, but because he knew wisdom lives in reflection. When you delay your response, you increase your power. 15th, live for virtue, not validation. That is the essence of Stoicism. And it is the death of manipulation. Because once you live by your own standard, the world loses its ability to bait you with praise or punish you with rejection. Marcus Aurelius was surrounded by advisers, politicians, flatterers, but he listened to none of them more than the voice of reason inside himself. And that is where your power lives. Because the real battlefield is not the world outside you, it's the one within. Manipulators aren't special. They're just more practiced at reading weakness than most are at guarding it. They study reactions, insecurities, unspoken desires. They probe with small tests, a comment here, a question there, just to see how much control they can gain. But to a Stoic, every interaction is an opportunity to train the will, to refine the soul. Marcus Aurelius didn't isolate himself from deception. He lived among it. He ruled in a palace where flattery was currency and betrayal was an art. But he walked calmly through it, as if none of it touched him. Because it didn't. He had built something stronger than walls. He had built a fortress of character. One that no compliment could soften, no insult could crack. When a man lives by principles, not impulses, he becomes something rare. He becomes unreadable. And manipulators hate what they cannot read. That frustrates them. because their power depends on patterns, emotional cues. But the Stoic gives them nothing. No panic, no desperation, just presence. Come, logic. Picture it. A manipulator approaches with a scheme. Their voice is honeyed, their eyes rehearsed. But they're met with stillness. With someone who doesn't need their approval, doesn't react to their bait, doesn't fear being misunderstood. In that moment, the game ends. Because the Stoic refuses to play. Marcus knew that the true art of defense was not resistance, but understanding. He didn't merely oppose manipulation. He studied its roots. He saw that all deception grows from the same soil, fear, ego, and unexamined desire. And so, he examined them. Not once. Daily. Like sharpening a blade, he sharpened his mind. Every morning, he reminded himself, "Today I will meet people who are selfish, dishonest, arrogant. But I will not let that distort who I am." He wasn't surprised by human behavior. He was prepared for it. And so must you be. Don't hope that the world will become honest. Don't wish that people will stop trying to use each other. That's not Stoicism. Stoicism is becoming the type of person who cannot be used. Not because you're hard or cynical, but because you're clear. Because you've disciplined your emotions, refined your intentions, and trained your perception. A Stoic doesn't seek revenge on manipulators. He doesn't expose them or obsess over them. He simply becomes useless to them. And in that uselessness, there is power. When you have nothing they can take, nothing they can tempt, you become untouchable. This is the paradox. The more you detach from needing to win, the more impossible it becomes to be manipulated. Because all manipulation depends on you wanting something so badly that you'll compromise yourself to get it. Praise, love, success, control. But if you've done the inner work, if you've made peace with not having those things, then the manipulator stands in front of you, empty-handed. What can they offer you? What can they threaten you with? Imagine that kind of freedom. A mind that belongs only to itself. A man who walks through a world full of traps, and yet remains untrapped. That's what Marcus Aurelius was. That's what the Stoics offer. Not a life without conflict, but a mind immune to it. Not a world without lies, but a heart that sees through them without bitterness. The man who cannot be manipulated is not cold. He's awake. And in that wakefulness he moves through the world, not as a pawn, not as a player, but as a presence. A presence that bends to no one's script but his own. And now the question is, can you become that man? Because the manipulator is waiting. The tests will come. The flattery will return. The temptations, the threats, the games, they never stop. But neither does the Stoic. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. You don't outplay manipulation. You outgrow it. Then let us continue, not with theory, but with the practice. Because Stoicism was never meant to be just read. It was meant to be lived. Every day. Every hour. In the unseen moments where no one is watching, where character is either sharpened or surrendered. Picture yourself in the real world. At work. At home. In a conversation with someone who knows how to press your buttons. They interrupt you. They twist your words. They offer compliments laced with expectation. You feel it rising, the urge to defend, to react, to prove something. But then, the voice of Marcus Aurelius cuts through the fog like a blade. You always own the option of having no opinion. What if you didn't need to correct them? What if silence, calm, and presence were your weapons? You shift your posture. You breathe slower. You say less. You begin observing instead of reacting. That is the moment your training begins. Because now you are no longer their puppet. You've stepped out of their game. In those exact moments, the Stoic mind is forged. Not in libraries. not in monasteries, but in the middle of the mess. And still you will stumble. We all do. Even Marcus did. There were days when he lost his temper, when he felt the weight of power, betrayal, fear. But he returned to the practice. That's what set him apart. Not perfection, discipline. A constant returning to the principles. The journal was his training ground. Each night, he reflected, where did I lose myself today? Where did I react instead of respond? He did not judge himself. He adjusted. That's the process. You will fail. But the Stoic doesn't fear failure. He uses it. As Epictetus taught, difficulties show what men are. So the next time someone tries to guilt-trip you into obedience, or flatter you into compromise, or threaten you into submission, you don't run. You don't fight. You return. You return to your breath, to reason, to that inner citadel that no one can invade. Every manipulator counts on your forgetfulness. They assume you'll forget who you are, that you'll become reactive, that you'll bend just a little to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to feel liked. But the Stoic remembers. He remembers that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the absence of internal contradiction. When your actions align with your values, no external pressure can move you. And now we go even deeper. The truth is, manipulation doesn't always come from outside. The most dangerous manipulator is often your own mind. That whisper of self-doubt. That craving for validation. That story you tell yourself that you are only worthy if others approve. That voice is subtle. It wears your face. It uses your own past as leverage. But Marcus Aurelius learned how to talk back to that voice. He'd write, "You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of them." Imagine the power of that awareness. Imagine hearing a manipulative thought in your own head. If you don't agree, they'll reject you. And instead of obeying it, you question it. You sit with it. You dissolve it. That's how the Stoic breaks the chain. Not by fighting the thought, by seeing through it. Manipulation thrives in the dark. But you've started turning on the lights. And now you begin to see clearly that not everyone who smiles at you is your ally, that not every compliment is a gift, that not every request for your time is innocent. And still, you don't grow bitter. Because bitterness is just another form of control. It's the ego clinging to its wounds. The Stoic chooses awareness over anger, distance over drama, clarity over chaos. You will walk into rooms where others are performing. You will hear the hidden agendas. You will feel the pressure to conform. But you will remember the weight of your training. You will not let someone else's manipulation become your mood. That is the mark of the Stoic. He owns his emotions. He owns his attention. He owns his fate. And in a world that constantly tries to rewrite your story, that makes you the author once again. ChatGPT said, "Then step into his shoes for a moment, not the emperor, but the man." Imagine Marcus Aurelius rising before the sun. The Roman Empire sleeps, but his mind is already at work. Before the court, before the Senate, before he faces the wolves in human form, he faces himself. His desk is bare, a candle flickers, and in front of him, his journal awaits. Not for show, not for history, but for war. A quiet war, the kind that's fought in the folds of the mind. He writes, slowly, deliberately, reminding himself what kind of day this will be. You will meet people who are selfish, deceitful, arrogant, jealous. He doesn't say this to be cynical. He says it to be prepared. Because Marcus understands something most people never learn. That suffering often comes not from what happens, but from being surprised it happened at all. The Stoic isn't shocked by human behavior. He expects it. He trains for it. And in that, he is never caught off guard. This is how he becomes immune, not by resisting reality, but by accepting it ahead of time. It's a form of mental rehearsal. He's not just journaling. He's building armor. Armor not made of steel, but of expectation, reason, and intention. So when the manipulator appears later that day, when the flattery starts, when the political games begin, he's not moved. He's already seen this play. He knows his part, and more importantly, he knows what not to do. He does not trade integrity for popularity. He does not sell peace of mind for a moment of comfort. He does not give his silence in exchange for belonging. Because he's trained. Because he's already faced the tempter, in his own mind, before breakfast. And this is where we all fail, isn't it? We face the world unprepared. We walk into meetings, conversations, relationships, hoping they go well. But Stoicism isn't built on hope. It's built on preparedness. The Stoic doesn't wish for a good day. He builds himself to remain good no matter what kind of day arrives. And that's how he becomes unmanipulatable. Because when you are mentally prepared, people can no longer catch you off balance. They can no longer use your hope against you, your fear against you, your fantasies against you. You see through the performance. You feel the energy shift when someone's smile hides a strategy. You hear the tone change when someone's praise is bait. And you do not engage. Not emotionally. Not defensively. Not reactively. Because you already trained this morning. You already saw this coming. And you are not here to be liked. You are here to live rightly. Marcus wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." This is the simple compass that guided him. A compass no manipulator can twist. Because while others spin in confusion, pulled in every direction by desire, fear, vanity, he stands still. Rooted in principle. Rooted in reason. And you can do the same. You don't need to be born in a palace. You don't need to wear robes. You need only to choose today to begin observing the hidden mechanics of your own mind. Ask yourself before every decision, is this coming from clarity or from a need to be accepted? Is this truly my choice or someone else's influence speaking through me? You begin to slow down. You begin to question before committing. And in that space, between stimulus and response, you reclaim control. Because control doesn't mean dominating others. It means not being dominated by yourself. Now imagine a world where you do this not once, not twice, but daily. Morning by morning. Journal by journal. Breath by breath. Imagine what kind of human you would become. Not cold. Not distant. But immovable. Come. Awake. A man who listens more than he speaks. A man who is curious but not naive. A man who can smile in the face of deception, not because he's blind to it, but because it no longer has power. And over time, people feel it. They sense they cannot manipulate you. They sense your clarity, your stillness, your refusal to betray your own values for momentary comfort. And in the silence of your restraint, in the discipline of your responses, you teach others without saying a word. You show them what real freedom looks like. The freedom of a man who cannot be bought, broken, or borrowed. Then let us continue, because the man who resists manipulation once is lucky, but the man who resists it every day is trained. This is not a one-time realization. This is a lifestyle, a rhythm, a sharpening of the inner blade so consistent that even when your guard is down, your principles are not. Marcus Aurelius didn't live with convenience. He lived with ritual. The early morning journal, the quiet hours of reflection, the discipline of confronting his flaws before life exposed them for him. These weren't aesthetic routines. They were survival tactics, mental armor for a world that constantly sought to bend his will. He knew that the most dangerous manipulator was not the enemy across the table, but the weakness within. That part of the mind that still craved applause. That old voice that whispered, "Just go along with it. Don't rock the boat. Be agreeable." The Stoic silences that voice, not with anger, but with clarity. So how do you live this? How do you, in a world of distractions, deceit, and digital manipulation, build the same discipline? Start with this. Wake up and write. Not to impress, but to reveal. Sit down and confront the day before it confronts you. Ask, who might try to sway me today? What tactics will they use? Praise, guilt, urgency. Where am I still vulnerable? This is your private briefing. Your mind's war council. Marcus did it every morning, and that's why he never entered the arena unarmed. Next, practice stillness. In a manipulated world, stillness is rebellion. While others rush, you pause. You breathe. You don't react immediately to messages, demands, invitations, praise, criticism. That pause? It's where manipulation dies, because it breaks the cycle of unconscious obedience. In that stillness, ask yourself, is this true? Is this necessary? Is this aligned with who I want to be? Most people don't ask those questions. That's why they're easy to control. You, on the other hand, begin to anchor yourself not in popularity, but in principle. Not in impulse, but in intention. Over time, your very presence changes. You're no longer easily moved. You're no longer manipulated by a flirty smile, a threat of rejection, or an urgent demand pretending to be important. You become unreadable, not because you hide, but because your motives are pure. And purity of motive makes you unpredictable to those who thrive on confusion. The manipulator depends on patterns. They expect the insecure to chase approval, the fearful to fold, the ambitious to compromise. But you've burned those scripts. Your responses no longer come from emotion, they come from clarity. So someone asks you to do something that feels off. You don't rush. You don't make excuses. You simply say, "Let me think about it." Or even better, you say nothing until you've consulted your principles. That's power. Not the kind that dominates others. The kind that refuses to be dominated by impulse. And when things go wrong, as they always will, you return. That's the third practice. Return. Every evening, take back your mind. Reflect. Journal again. Not to punish yourself, but to track your strength. Where did I hold the line? Where did I bend? Why? What need was I chasing that gave them power over me? You begin to see it. Slowly, clearly. That manipulation never works unless you've left an open door, an unguarded need, a fear, a false belief. But each night, you close those doors. One by one. And that's how you become free. Not overnight, but inevitably. Others will still try. Manipulators never disappear. But they'll feel the change. They'll sense the void where your buttons used to be. They'll search for the old weaknesses and find only calm. They'll offer you bait and watch you let it rot untouched. You will not need to fight them. You will outgrow them. That's the Stoic path. Not a shield against hardship, but a fire that makes you immune to it. And one day, maybe sooner than you think, you will walk into a room full of noise, full of pressure, full of influence, and you'll feel nothing but peace. Because you are no longer reacting to the world. You are guiding yourself through it. Yes. Let's descend deeper, into the darker crucible where Stoicism wasn't just practiced from thrones, but from chains. If Marcus Aurelius ruled with discipline, then Epictetus suffered into wisdom. Born a slave, beaten, silenced, and yet more free than the men who owned him. Because while his body belonged to another, his mind never did. That is the terrifying strength of a trained soul. It cannot be conquered from the outside. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Now think of that. Not a poet in leisure. A slave. Saying that. He had every reason to hate, every right to complain. But he chose instead to see the world not as it should be, but as it is. And from that brutal clarity he found power. The power to not be broken. Not by cruelty, not by injustice, not by manipulation. What made him dangerous to those who controlled him was this: he didn't react. He didn't beg. He didn't bargain. He obeyed where needed, but inwardly he remained sovereign. Because Stoicism, to him, wasn't theory. It was survival. It was freedom earned in silence. So when we talk about resisting manipulation today, in offices and families and online conversations, it's not just a modern strategy. It's an ancient revolt. It's the same revolt that kept a Roman slave more mentally free than a Roman senator. And Seneca, wealthy, political, entangled in Nero's court, he knew both luxury and terror. He saw manipulation not just in whispers and backroom schemes, but in public spectacle, in forced alliances, in the charade of empire. Yet even as death circled him, he trained himself to be calm. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." And you can hear it in his words. He knew fear, but he chose courage. Every day, he trained it like a muscle. When Nero demanded death, Seneca did not grovel. He opened his veins. In peace. As if to say, you can take my life, but never my clarity. Never my consent. That is the end of manipulation, when you remove the fear that it feeds on. So when someone tries to guilt-trip you into compliance, when someone uses silence to provoke you, when someone flatters you to gain advantage, you remember Epictetus, who lost everything and yet could not be moved. You remember Seneca, who chose his death rather than violate his principles. You remember Marcus, writing alone before the chaos, anchoring his soul in reason. And you realize you are not powerless. You are simply untrained. Until now. Because now you have begun to see it, that the true Stoic weapon isn't words. It's self-possession. That no matter what anyone tries to make you feel, you have a choice. They may raise their voice. You remain calm. They may insult. You observe. They may offer the perfect temptation. You pause, consult your principles, and walk on. And when they ask, "Why can't I get to you?" you won't need to answer. Your life will be the answer. You will have become what the Stoics trained for. Not just unmoved, but unshakable.